Alex Answer here. It is November 15th in the year 2018. Today on Outside the Box TV, we are going through more of the book from the author, Dion Fortune. The name of the book is Psychic Self-Defense. Now, before we get started, I previously said I would continue this at outsidethebox.vhx.tv. I will, but I'm going to specialize that particular series or video on my own personal case studies and certain things that I'm going to leave off YouTube. So I'm going to be continuing on YouTube to discuss these things, and certain things that I might leave personal or leave over there, I will put on my second platform. I would like to welcome the new member over at outsidethebox.vhx.tv, as well as Robert and a few new people that are over at Patreon. I believe Kyle 6. Thank you for joining. Patreon.com. So please check out the links down below. We are going into winter, and I'm motivated to keep up the light, if you will, the true light. And I feel like I've learned from previous experiences, not only in winters and the types of lower moods and whatnot that can come about during the holiday season and whatnot, including self-pity and picking up on the negative emotions of others, as also people drink more and get more DUIs and are involved in more domestic disputes. So I'm really involved in and interested in what's happening to us spiritually as we go into these times, not only in the darker part of the seasons, but our darker epochs. I mean, there are certain times in which it seems like there's less spiritual attacks in the population. Have you ever noticed that? And there's other times where it's like, who are you going to call? Somebody better call Ghostbusters. Somebody better do something, because there's something really weird going on up in here. And so that's kind of why I left the place in which I was born in Oregon, and now I'm in Colorado. But it doesn't mean, right? And I learned this through trial and error. It doesn't mean that by moving away from a dense population center and moving away from the grid, that we also don't find ourselves entangled with lower energies, where they be called elementals, whether some people may choose to call them archons like myself, or other people are totally bypassing even putting it into a box or giving it that type of form, but just recognizing it as interference. And so I'm going to be getting into this, and you're going to notice a parallel in language also with the description of thought forms. And so certain things could literally be caused by human thought forms. Not so much demons or archons or ghosts or poltergeists, but by human thought forms. There's certain things that come up here, like the magnetic link between human beings, like having a lock of someone's hair or something like that. Well, having a lot of access to someone online or their content could be like that. Never before have your ancestors nor mine had the ability to come to people around the world, but it comes with an energetic cost. And as a truth speaker on YouTube, it's a unique experience. That's a little different than the person that hasn't put themselves out there for the world to judge. And there's more judgment than support. At the same time, by going deeper into my own spiritual truths and not limiting myself to one book, I'm noticing increased support trickling in. And I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that's in response to what I'm covering geopolitically. Although it may, it seems like most of that is in relation to my spiritual commentary. And instead of that being a backseat issue, it's moving more to the front of the house, because as we move into more dangerous times on our planet and within this reality, we need to know about the different levels of self-defense. And that's not so much about fighting entities, but removing those things from ourselves in our mind, our thought forms, if you will, that may be attracting certain things. So this isn't a typical law of attraction book, nor is Dion Fortune a typical person. I barely know her biography, but what I can tell you is by going over here and looking at some information about her, not only did she inspire somewhat of a movement, and I'm sure there's a fair amount of controversy. Rarely is there not. The Magical Battle of Britain is in reference to a book that was about this time period in the 1940s, actually right after 1939, and apparently, so the article is coming up. Okay, so we have some of the information here. And I'm thinking about how much I'm going to read from this and how much I'm going to read from the book. I think what I'm going to do is just kind of give you an overview on this and then get to some of the information in the book. Apparently, there were a number of people that were involved in a spiritual battle, if you will, a pushback against the occult activities of Nazi Germany. And some of them didn't live very long. And apparently this author was one of them. She died in 1946 of leukemia, and it may have been of old age, but there was some heavy battles that apparently were taking place between herself and her mystery school and the occult aspects or some of the occult practitioners, who knows what was going on with regards to Nazi Germany. I would say they're probably potentially being aided by some archonic forces. So this author may have really come up on a serious radar. Who knows what was going on? Of course, the word witch is used loosely to demonize, but it sounds like she was in the company of a number of different people, and they were putting their minds together to astrally go to war against the entities that were in and around Adolf Hitler and the rise of Nazi Germany. That is some heavy stuff. So there are no instructions as to how to do that. And this book was written way before that. But I'm just like briefly now, because I didn't even look before, looking at her bio. Apparently in 1939, she started to circulate secret writings. And so as they saw the rise of Nazi Germany and the threat and the potential of invasion, there were certain things that were done in secret then. Not all things that are done or written in secret are coming from an Illuminati secret society or the New World Order. Sometimes people are literally trying to stay alive and work together in small groups, true resistance groups, not like these fake resistance groups that you see right now in the mainstream media. So keep that in mind. There's a reason why some things were kept away from the church and kept away from the public eye. And so in today's, and really it is somewhat of an open-air surveillance society, which we participate in, as we also put out information and add, if you will, into the hive mind, the collective. And so there are repercussions for that. But in the open-air surveillance society, we also volunteer information about what we're aware of, our knowledge base, our spiritual gifts. And we may not know the repercussions for things like that until way later on, years after Facebook has been developed, years after people have joined their first online Facebook psychic group, or where people talk about RH negative, or where people talk about waking up. Like there's a way in which people can put themselves up on a radar, and that magnetic link could be established. So I'm doing a lot of free flow, but I did want to intend to do some reading, but it also can be a little bit dry if someone's just reading and reading and reading, and I'm giving you a lot of my own takes. So what I want to do is just read a little bit here and there and then come back to it. Okay, I just want to read a little here and then come back and read a little bit more and let some of this information sink in. Right, so I'm actually going forward. Okay, I'm going to read from page 161. We have distinguished the various types of psychic attack, and we have described the methods that can be employed in carrying them out, and we have also noted the various forms of delusion, fraud, and autosuggestion that may complicate the issue. We are now in a position to discuss the questions of diagnosis. Let us consider the whole matter from a practical point of view. Suppose a stranger comes with a story of a psychic attack. What should be our procedure? We must first of all bear in mind that there is a great need of caution in presuming that a psychic attack is being made. Psychic attacks are comparatively rare things. We must not assume that we are dealing with one unless we have excluded all the other things that it can possibly be. Not so long ago, I came across a case of alleged obsession, which turned out to be neglected constipation, and which was effectively exorcised with castor oil. If there are any physical symptoms at all, even if they are no more than a bad color or a bad breath, a diagnosis ought to be made by a qualified medical practitioner, even if the trouble has a predominating psychic element. Its origin may be physical. If the doctor finds no evidence of organic disease or some complaint, the case may be held to have passed the final test, and we may feel that it is worthwhile to proceed to the psychic investigation. If the case is a bad one, or the trouble is of long standing, the doctor will probably find the patient is debilitated, even if there is nothing definitely amiss. There's a great deal that can be done upon the physical plane to help the person who is suffering from an occult attack. And we may as well consider that these physical methods, while we are upon the subject of the part, can be played by a doctor in dealing with the case. So there's, of course, references to physical health, the dangers of alcohol abuse, drug abuse, not getting enough sleep, not getting enough food. I mentioned also not getting enough light. I mentioned also with my modern day knowledge, too much internet. So in the modern day, we can also see things that can cause physical issues and cause cognitive decline. Certain important psychic centers are in the head. One of the simplest ways of checking their activity is by drawing the blood down from the head. Another important center is the solar plex or plexus. During a psychic attack, this is often felt to be tense or distressing. You might also identify with the term, or I've heard the term, butterflies in the stomach, and they may not necessarily be in the stomach. It may be anxiety in the solar plexus. Vegetarianism has to be thoroughly understood and well done if it is to be successful. And even so, there is a large proportion of people who are incapable of digesting vegetable proteins, which are not nearly so easily dealt with as animal substances. I've heard from more than a few people that protein helps in protecting one's spirit. Now, wherever we get that protein and whatnot, there's various sources for protein, and also how animals are treated is really, really important. But I don't think that it's really necessarily a matter of going vegan. I think that's a path for some, and some people have body types. For those on the compassion argument, why isn't there as much uproar about the humans by the millions that are being removed off the planet? If it's more on the compassionate, spiritual end of things and not so much dietary. So these are things to keep in mind. But in my experience, diet is important. Eating is important. Sometimes it's not about eating perfectly, but rather that we're eating something. Sometimes we can even find ourselves being programmed by this world to look at the negative and be looking at food that isn't necessarily organic in a negative light, which in a way is certainly not sending that food good energy. I do remember, though, an old female friend of mine, her name was Emily. I've mentioned her before. She'd always pray before we ate or put her hands around the food. And I remember it's almost as if like the Creator was showing me, even though this is going to be your wife, your long-term girlfriend, this is an example of a female that's a little bit more tapped into the rest of the people that you meet throughout your life. And things like that, that awareness of energy and that appreciation for energy always stood out to me, and I never forgot her. Even though I'm no longer on Facebook now, folks, and I do live off the grid and no longer in the city in which I was born, the good thing about coming across people like that and other pleasant experiences, we remember what that felt like, to feel that sense of spiritual communion. In a world where a lot of us have been exposed to false doctrines that things are always getting better instead of the reality things go up and down in cycles, it's really about the individual, whether we're getting better, whether we're getting healthier, or whether we're getting sicker. But when we look at the world, we don't always see progress. Even when we see the battle of good and evil, that doesn't mean that there aren't those that are on the side of the light, the white light, not the black light, not the black lodge, but those that work from the true light that may face physical repercussions for the demons they put down in this world. So I don't think that we should be disillusioned by the fact that sometimes some of the warriors of the light, the Gondoffs in this world, sometimes there are going to be a few cliffs here and there that they go down when they choose to make a stand and say, "You shall not pass." They may be cast down into that fire, into that abyss down below, or struck with an illness after taking on powerful deities. It does not mean that their deeds have been forgotten. Does not mean that at all. I want to move forward to some of the more... I went out for coffee. I took myself off for a date. Pretty romantic. AA romance last night. So I read more from this book sitting down for 2 hours straight at a coffee shop. It's not always easy for me to do that. Part of it also isn't psychic attack. It's the fact that when some people have a certain level of magnetism, I'm not attacking them. They're not attacking me. But when I'm in their field, when I'm in their environment, when I'm in their coffee shop, when I'm in their place of work, when I'm trying to work with others, there's something about us that it isn't necessarily that there's anything wrong with us, but there could be some of us that are a certain level of magnetism or energy because of our knowledge. I don't like to use the word occult, but because of our knowledge regarding certain things and the others, just by having knowledge of certain things and me talking about them, there is a level of them being invoked, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to be silent and stop talking to you about that. But it makes things difficult for the truth speaker that speaks about the others or the dark side or the unseen. She discusses this as well. So part of what I'm saying is paraphrasing, and there's so much of what she's written about that's paraphrasing what I've already said without the references to the internet and the technologies that came basically 100 years after she wrote her book. But if someone like her was alive today, they would be seeing what's taking place today. The other thing that I'll mention, and then we're going to start mentioning or talking about methods of defense in brief, but find a spiritual practice and a way to ground out Eckhart Tolle, the pain body. I've heard others that have full-on lectures just about psychic self-defense. They talk about Eckhart Tolle and the pain body and dealing with those stuck traumas within us that could be attracting thought form entities that want to continue to victimize those that have already been victimized or those that are still marked in that way. So Jared sent me something of interest regarding Carl Jung, and I want to come back to it later, but it is in relation to his study of the German thought form during the World War I era and or post-World War I leading into World War II and the rise of the Nazis, even if he may have had some he may have some fans that are on the right today, but he was really in a way like predicting the rise of it because of a thought form, but he wasn't necessarily endorsing it, but he was noting how it worked. Now, this thought form I see in operation today and in relation to the Odin worship. And it is a rising phenomena, kind of like the Slender Man with the girls. It's, in our world, Odin. It doesn't mean that all things are dark with regards to that. or people that type into that, it means that apparently Odin seems to be a go-to deity or entity for a lot of people that are being radicalized today. It seems to have a collective phenomena. And I would say that certain deities might be used to promote the culling agenda or the depopulation agenda. You see, there are those that talk to, like Alex Jones and others, about the depopulation agenda, but yet they play a role in the depopulation agenda by making common enemies out of the others. And literally, I would do bits where I'm showing, they're acting like the others, crawling over the wall, the barbarians, and they can literally manufacture events. There's even some information saying that Soros is in with Putin. So even if there is a Soros connection down south, there's a larger agenda overall as to what's taking place with the divide of America. I need to get back to this book. But if people are going to be tuning in, looking for information about psychic self-defense that found this online, you need to be aware of what's happening to your nation and not try to separate spiritual understandings from being aware of what's going on. That's not going to protect your psyche. So the psyche of America is under attack to want a wall to keep itself in potentially. Okay, that's a controversial statement. Guess who I heard it first initially from? Ron Paul. And I think others. So moving now here, but it's important that we recognize those that came before us. Before the big media, before the age of the internet, there was Dion Fortune. There were people like Carl Jung, who was clear enough to be able to see the collective thought form patterning and go, oh shit. We see the psychology that's coming upon this collective consciousness, unconsciousness, but what's in the collective unconscious that a lot of people don't realize is there, it is there, and it's playing on our instincts, and it's alive and well today. That's why when you take a closer look, I don't know if my video is still up on Jeremy Christian. I had to remove some things that had copyrighted content in the last year, and I should have documented some things. But I'm talking about the occult beliefs of Jeremy Christian, the person that was involved in several murders on a Max train. Even if he was provoked, and people should be a little bit more careful when dealing with mentally ill people, there were things on his Facebook page. It's less about politics and Trump and more about him doing shout-outs to Odin, Kali, and other deities that are associated with the archons or demons. You see, but this society just calls that mentally ill. So this society now in 2018 doesn't really leave a place to be taking a closer look at what's really happening to these individuals. The Florida shooter, turns out he was hearing voices. And so there's YouTube videos saying, was he a targeted individual? But they're usually looking at the direction of the government and not at more down-to-earth directions, because there are reasons why some people snap. Only now they have technology to where there can even be forces using technology that are beyond human, but yet they're using technology and they're using the surveillance society and they're using the internet to observe their targets. And they can find someone, they can choose to make someone a target. They realize that they are weak enough for their aura to be penetrated. And there can be ways in which they're able to figure that out in this world of the unseen. Oh, that person could be easily manipulated, and that can fill the role in this agenda. And so there's a lot of things right now happening in the world of humans that are coming from the realm of the unseen, because some of the most basic fundamentals of protecting oneself, of one's mind from intrusion, they're not being done by today's society. Spiritual maintenance, grounding, creating distance between ourselves and the object that is affecting our energy and mind state. And that is whether they intend to or not. Because as sensitive beings, there can even be some things that aren't psychic attacks. They're thought forms. There could be someone, say an ex-spouse of yours, that's strongly obsessing on you. And because you guys had sex and exchanged some fluids, there's a little bit of a tighter bond. You add in the internet, there are people that aren't even having sex that have tight psychological bonds because of the technological magnetic link. This is why there is a little bit of rationale with being somewhat anonymous with your web activity. Some people do it for the wrong reasons. Others, whether they know they're doing this or their subconscious is doing this, they're creating energetic distance, whether they believe in it or not. Energy or psychic attack or auras, whether they believe in those things or not. Non-local awareness, remote viewing, whether they believe in those things or not. Some people will create anonymous handles for their online activity to create a little bit of psychic space. So they're a little less feeling the blowback from what it is that they're doing. In their mind, it might just be protecting their physical identity and their actual name, so it doesn't actually catch up with them and cause issues with work and cause issues with other things. And trust me, I know, using my birth name, that maybe there can be a complication why we have difficulty with relationships or getting jobs when we start a YouTube channel with the name in which is stamped on our birth certificate. But I'm more interested in pleasing spirit, the world of spirit, than pleasing someone that's going to be looking at my resume, trying to determine this week, oh, should I take on this person as a dishwasher or something as simple as that? You'd be amazed the type of stuff that people may go through if they're going to get involved in this type of a work and research. It's safe for people to just get involved with the Democrats and the Republicans and call this kook stuff, because it's not just about going outside the left-right paradigm. It's going beyond the physical world. It's going beyond the five senses. It's adding in the sixth and perhaps more. It's looking a little bit deeper into why we're in the situation that we're in. That's not a place for everyone. And it is a place that is also shrouded with darkness. You need to be careful either where you get your information from, but also who you entangle your energies with. So that's relationships. That's even like sharing like marijuana pipes. I don't think that it's wise as a marijuana smoker for someone to be sharing their essence with a group of other people that may be in a lower state. That is another way those spirits can piggyback and go from one human to another through the transference of something that connects with the mouth, that connects with the lungs. I think that there's something to that. So there are certain things, it's not so much that certain things are wrong, like sex or marijuana or certain things, but the ways in which a lot of humans are connecting when maybe one human shouldn't be connecting with the other through various means. And then you're also going to have certain situations where people that are of a lower nature have spiritual attachments and big-time demons that will freak out and shriek when an angel of light walks through the door. And an angel of light might be accompanying a human that has tapped into an angelic mindset. So I know that I've been in experiences where I've been reading spiritual texts or journaling, and I've cleared out a coffee shop. And I know I didn't fart. And I know that my thoughts were not sending out KILL to the people around me. I was just simply tapping into my spirit, and my field was activated. And in a way, it acts as almost sage to demonic entities. But how does then someone survive in a human society with demonic entities around so many humans? This is why some of us opt for an off-grid way of life, and we don't function very well in Times Square or even in downtown Portland, where there are so many humans and so many energies. We opt for a way of life away from all that noise. And even if our body wants to chase the lusts and desires and the bright lights, once you go on a certain path, there's no going back. I went to Las Vegas last year, and I wasn't chasing prostitutes or drugs. It was on my way back to Colorado because I realized I went to California too soon. Why did I go to California too soon? Well, I felt cooped up here last year, and it was exactly this time last year I had some money saved up, and it was a decent time. People were giving during that time. I thought, I really need to get up and go. But I did it too fast, and I felt very spiritually attacked by the experience, but I also felt protected by angels. I felt protected by angels in Las Vegas. I felt protected by angels in San Diego. So I was there briefly, didn't have as many people watching the program as I had hoped then, the channel. I thought maybe like there'd be a ton of people in California that were viewers of this. And that's not what happened. But we're here now in 2018. It's no longer 2017, and I don't know if that'll ever happen again. But I did feel finally what it feels like to be on the boardwalk or to be near the beach and to kind of feel that. Kind of segueing, and we'll get back here. Some of us that still have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of traumas to shed. We're not yet ready to deal with all of the harsh energies that come with all these urban environments. We're still working up to that point. So there's a period in the true speaker's life to where they need to gather their strength. And just because they're in desire, lust, loneliness, whatever else, right? Sometimes it's just simple as just wanting to have a big meal because of that energy that we want, that protein. Sometimes they just don't have a lot here. So it could be a lot of reasons why someone can externalize. So there's a therapeutic element to getting out and traveling, but I'm trying to do more of that in this region. But when I went as far as another region beyond here, and with my level of sensitivity and having lived at 8,000 feet for a few years, then going down to sea level, I mean, I can literally feel intuitively. Before I left, just looking at Google Maps, I was looking at Skid Row of Los Angeles going, ugh. And looking at my route. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way through here to Las Vegas and then go all the way here through Death Valley. And woo, picking up on some heavy energy. I mean, do you ever just like look at the energy on Google satellite maps and look at certain areas and almost kind of feel it? And almost, not only that, maybe your imagination might go, that looks like a big ass face. And who's to say that it's not? Almost like a big-ass face or deity of the earth itself looking back at us, giving us a little bit of a wink. Maybe it's not just pyramids on the Mars planet or on the moon that we should be looking at, but maybe right here at home. And there are many that do. There are some people that say that some of the stuff's been erased on Google Earth and things of that nature. Who knows? So taking our time to get into our next area, in writing for the general reader an account of the methods to be used in combating the psychic attack, I am recommending those excellent manuals upon medicine and surgery, which an enlightened board of trade insists shall be provided for the captains of ships, together with a cupboard full of remedies, harmless and otherwise. So it is in dealing with psychic trouble. Wide experience is needed for diagnosis, and specially trained faculties and specially developed powers are needed to cope with the conditions that may be found. This book is more in the nature of a manual of first aid than a treatise on treatment. Okay, so I came across some stuff yesterday. I was really, really potent and to the point. And some of the stuff I haven't read yet. So I'm trying to cover some of the basics. Having made his diagnosis and being ready to proceed to the handling of the case, the exorcist has to achieve three things. He must repair his patient's aura, clear the atmosphere of his environment, and break his contact with the forces that are causing the trouble. These three things are interdependent, and not one of them is first or last. It is next to impossible to get a damaged aura to heal if you do not clear the atmosphere, nor will the atmosphere remain clear as long as you cannot break the contracts. So maybe when they were initially trying to film the Native Americans and even some today, they don't want their picture taken. Think about the internet again and come to an understanding on your own. If you have felt either your own mind influenced by thought forms from others on the internet, I don't mean just going, whoa, I'm reading this and I like this. Maybe a deeper reason why some of that stuff sticks when it may not be legitimate, especially the illusions of separation and the fight, fight, fight. Look at how a lot of people are sucked in. And again, we asked the question about the archonic interference over the rise of the extreme right, as well as violence on the extreme left that does little to actually stop the advance of the right. It's almost as if there's a spirit working both sides of the protest, but very few humans alive would be sensitive enough to see it. They would mostly just pick sides or talk about spirituality, but not talk about modern events. And this is another point. We have very little exact knowledge concerning these subtle forces, which are the basis of both occult attack and spiritual healing. But we have good reason to believe that in their nature, they are closely related to electricity. Okay? Electricity, the human aura, the electromagnetic field, electromagnetism, the field of electromagnetism, which other spirits live in. Think now. Think about the sun, the moon, the tides, other forces that impact the electromagnetic field, even causing geomagnetic storms. I believe we're in one now, we're moving to the next one. All of that affects us. So there's certain periods in which the veil is thinner. This is information that's not in this book. That's my information. I think that's the additional information. But the sun, which is a transmitter receiver, perhaps just like us, the sun, which is a transmitter, transmits electromagnetic frequencies. And those frequencies are not always the same. So certain frequencies from the sun, maybe like a certain song that's playing to a certain tune, and it may even be romantic. Other things may almost sound like death metal or come across as something intense. But ultimately what the sun is doing is not attacking the earth. It is affecting the earth with energy. But a lot of humans today don't understand that. So the point of that, when we have an elevated level of electricity, it almost seems as if, like, and with the veil thinner, that we're easier to manipulate, or when we are actually manipulated, there's a greater yield on return on investment from the energy put out from the spiritual parasites. So they may not choose to mess with certain people that they can't manipulate, but they can manipulate some people to misuse their energy to going to war and doing some nasty stuff. They're going to be busy working over those people. Other people might be having their own spiritual experience, tapping into the light. Someone else who's out of balance, who's not able to handle that energy, they are being thrown manufactured events. They are being thrown fake news. And if they're being manipulated on a specific level, and I believe a lot of people are on a large scale, spiritual parasites could be using Facebook and the internet through forms of dark synchronicity to throw information and people at people. That's actually the last thing that they want. It's a form of dark synchronicity. There are synchronicities that can happen in your own life, right? But in this world in which events can be controlled, not all synchronicities are coming from the Creator. Not all synchronicities are coming from your guides. Be aware. There could be a reason why you see that cat crossing by twice. Water is the vehicle for purification, which has been said by Robert Bruce, and I have a book by his, which I've read sections of right over there. It's used by in the rite of baptism by the church and the preparation of the place by the occultist about to perform a ceremony. Strictly speaking, there should be a trace of salt in the water thus employed, and both salt and water are blessed with powerful invocations when the priest is preparing holy water, whether for a baptism or for placing the holy water for the use in the congregation. Now, there is something about, I've always felt this, something being submerged in water to bless it. And so that is essentially baptism. When I go to a hot springs, when I go take a bath, when I get a shower, I feel that I physically look different. Some days, like today, it may feel like I've had a shower. I haven't today. But I changed my energy up yesterday, went down to town. So something as simple as getting extra air, getting extra light, getting water. So connecting with the elements, connecting with nature. And I also raised the speculation, I wonder if maybe there's a deeper reason why some of those electrical water fountains that people have in the homes that really have grown in popularity in recent years, what if that can add some positive energy to the field in our home? So think about these things: tuning forks, Himalayan salt lamps, some sort of water, sage. So there are different things in which full spectrum lights, get rid of the fluorescence, get yourself some full spectrum lights. They're cheap. You really just need a decent lamp. The lamp bulbs are really not that much, although you can find a salesman that'll sell you a bulb for $30, right? If you just don't look yourself. But so these are tips that I'm going to add in that relate to our modern age. Some of the modern tools that are out there. There's also something called a grounding, which I've never been a fan of. There's no excuse for running away from nature, not using nature, but some people may have some chronic issues to where certain things may help, like a grounding blanket. And I only have a little bit of experience with one of those. But I wanted to share some things for the on-demand audience that I'm going to get into later. But I won't hold back. Being super promiscuous during a certain period of time where all of a sudden people just want to hang out with you, like in late 2011 with me, or it was 2010, 2009, there could be a period in which, let's say there is like an incubus, succubus, and it's being sexually transferred, and all of a sudden there's 4 people that someone's with in a month, and none of those were actually based in love, and one of those girls were actually hearing voices from an alien spacecraft. You know, like something out of a Terminator, Sarah Connor trying to get me a message before the apocalypse. I mean, Mary was one hell of a, but, you know, and we've talked about that. We've talked about the dragon baby conspiracy theory. They took the baby. The aliens took the baby. And who knows? Maybe some things actually did happen. There's a little dragon baby running around flying a spacecraft. Heaven forbid if that's true, but actually makes sense of a whole lot of things. But yeah, I've heard it all, ladies and gentlemen. But let's just say someone is naive and they don't know what I know now, and they're like hanging out with people on Craigslist. Some people could be sent out to get a lock-in on a true speaker's energy and then create the interference. They can literally go, okay, we've got spirit A, B, C, and D all locked in zone. Now hit the big red button, cause the interference. Now drive them out of that region or cause the interference there. And I think that these things can happen. There's probably maybe even a deeper story if we were to hear it out from like the, you know, why a lot of rock stars that actually did become famous and successful that ended up doing the groupie thing and the drug thing, why they crashed and burned and basically destroyed their career. I bet you, right, if we were to look at it from a Gnostic perspective or a spiritual perspective or a perspective from here, that we would find them breaking all of the fundamental rules to protecting their own aura. And maybe there's a reason why Dave Mustaine went in a super Christian direction to save himself, because he went in a super dark direction when he was literally running with the devil. And so, you know, there's something entertaining about watching the VH1 behind the music. And whether you like Megadeth, I like a lot of old school Megadeth, but you can also maybe pick up on, if you're a little bit sensitive, that's the entertainment that's very special for some of us, that the other part of society doesn't experience. We'll be picking up on elements of their demons and how like they're not the same anymore at the moment that they're being interviewed. And we will just know what they're talking about without them saying it. And elements of what was going on within his focus and his lyrics and the stuff that he was putting in his body and then describing the things that were going on behind the scenes. Yeah, it makes sense, man. Guy surrounded himself with demons. Demons were on the covers of all these things. And there was almost like a thought form entity that almost came and blew through from the 70s to the 90s. And it's still there, but it almost seems as if the character of the entity has changed. That's why the sound of the music seems to have changed and the fashion seemed to change and the humans seem to look a little different, because in reality, they're all connected into a group thought or thought form. And those thought forms, or archons thought forms, where does one begin, where does one end, vice versa, micro, macro, inner, outer. But it seems that times change, but the times change only the appearance of the fads of the archons of the thought forms, or, you know, the decorations of the fallen world, but it's still the same fallen world. And we need to protect our minds, whether it's 1930, when this book was coming out, or today. But I'm going to come back and look a little deeper at Carl Jung and what he discovered about the thought forms and the repercussions for that, and maybe how we can hypothesize, did his understanding of that get used against the people? Could there be some people that are hearing the nature of how the thought form works and go, well, wow, that's giving me an idea. That's pretty sick and twisted. But maybe, the work of Carl Jung and others, obviously so it could be used against the population. While the population is sleeping, not realizing that they can enable themselves with this knowledge. Alexander Chavinsky, who I should probably do like a special video one day just about him and just about him. If anybody knows about a book about Alexander Chavinsky, let me know. But I'm sure that there are books in Russian, okay, as far as books in English. But this was the guy in Russia that was locked up for his discovery of the war cycle, solar wars. Think Star Wars? I've coined the term solar wars. Think like a big sun, literally the font Star Wars, because that's what we're dealing with, and that's what he discovered. And why was he thrown in the gulags for multiple years? Did he stumble upon something that triggered something within the matrix in his time that caused the Russian oligarchs to go, whoa, 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 out of the pool? What do you think you're doing? Come here, Alex. Come here, Mr. Scientist. Welcome to the coal mines. Well, I'll tell you what. My life hasn't exactly been cozy since proposing some of these ideas. My period in living in my vehicle was after, not before, was after Mark Passio's For Your Mind conference, where I presented on an early Saturday morning with hardly anybody in the audience. They're mostly there to see the big speakers. But see, that was a big part of my life experience that I reached out to him and the organizer, Anthony, as they were organizing it at the last second, said, hey, I'd be willing to come to Philadelphia to talk to you about the solar cycles and their influence over the war cycles and what I see coming between the West and China in 2025. Now, very few people remember that presentation or were even there. I do have it on this channel in case you want to watch it. I also have an ebook at solarmaxnews.com. Write it down, grab a pen. That's solarmaxnews.com. Click on that ebook and then go down and look at those solar cycle peaks and look at when the wars were. On a deeper level, I do think there's a connection between the UFO sightings. Not everyone may agree with that. And that's not exactly a great overlay of the charts. But when I saw a recent chart that came out showing the UFO sightings between 1940 and today, when you overlay the solar cycle and you see periods in which there's more sun, less sun, there's literally a period in which I think that we saw more alien abductions or abductions of humans or reports of it, whatever caused it. And we're talking about the 1960s. We're talking about after the 50s. Like things just blew up, not just our technology, not just our little cassette tapes, not just the devil worshiping butt rock bands. Oh, it's all about nothing. Oh, it's all just one big joke, but also like wild reports about horrible things happening to women. Now, what kind of a society is this that cares about women, women's rights, the sacred feminine, hearing what women really believe in, not being a patriarchal society, and yet we have the 1978 False Memory Act. We live in this day and age where it's like, okay, anybody just claims something, me too, just believe them. Yeah, unless it's maybe somebody else. But what if they have a memory of something else that's out of the ordinary? Then they're considered a kook. Then they're considered the subject of some sort of, but yet when you look at pop culture, and I've gone into these rants for on and on and on, they make a lot of these things fiction, so we laugh off the idea of some of these things being real. Demons aren't things to laugh off of, though. Ha ha ha! Humor is good, but it isn't fiction. Some of the stuff is real. Some people could be affected by watching something as simple as the TV show Sightings. I remember being afraid. Okay, I was trying to write about my life again, just in chapters, and it's difficult to get beyond age 12 or 13 because a lot of trauma happened to me by 12 or 13. But the death of the farm story was a part of that. But there was a period in which my grandfather left the house, my grandmother left the house, Bruce, if you're still watching, you left the house. Scumbag Phil, he left the house, went up with Melissa, Sean, and David. So my childhood cousins were no longer in the house. I swear, and I don't know whether it was some other activities that had happened within that house before I was born, or other things, or whether other activities done by others brought negative energy to the house. I highly suspect that. I don't really see a whole lot of angels back in the day. I think there's probably some family secrets I know nothing about. But I remember what it was like for Mom to be gone and me to be all alone in that house, which I was responsible for cleaning in its last days before it sold for $380,000, less than it was actually worth on the market back in 1993, after it was on the market for 2 years, and then clean like Cinderella every day or every week for 2 years, clean that house that I'll never see again. But it did feel like the pain, all of a sudden, for the first time, I'm getting a sleep paralysis attack. All of a sudden, for the first time, I'm feeling like that attic is haunted. That attic in Philip's room next to Mom's room. I don't know what was going on, but I also realized that by the time the remodeling started, I had already moved one step away from my mother's room into the other room, further away, giving myself an extra 15 feet, looking at the timeline, and that we're going into the solar cycle. And then again, I'm telling you, I think the solar cycle, the earthquakes, the phenomena, the ghost hunting, the wars, even the Gulf War. Look at SummerSlam. Look at those guns on Hogan. I mean, literally going out of the 80s into the early 90s, shooting off with the Gulf Storm, the death of the farm happening shortly after, the crime waves in the cities and the gang violence. All of that was like a heavy solar cycle period. And sometimes, like I've said in other videos, it can like move something forward and then it's a new cycle. So that literally ended the cycle of the multiple families on the farm. And I'm telling you, whether it be one person's activity, where I'm not pointing fingers, or another person's infidelity, who knows what it was, but there was a spirit in that house in Aurora that played a role in making sure that we were never a family again. Now, whether or not someone's hearing that message or not, there was something done on that land. And I don't know who did what, but it created a thought form, and it created an entity, and it created anger and rage amongst the people in that household, not to mention my mother, my grandmother, and other people on their side of the family. But there was also Kendall across the street, and you were talking about something that's like something out of Cher, from the WF. Bruce's girlfriend back in the day. You guys remember Cher, the guy that was running around with Macho Man, Randy Savage? Cher was across the street. Oh, wait. I got the wrong name. It wasn't Cher. Cher's the other lady. Moonstruck. Sherry. With Macho Man, Randy Savage, the evil, queen type character. Kind of like a rock and roll, like White Snake babe left over from the 80s. Yeah, man. I remember. So, yeah. A genuine lack of a spiritual bond amongst the family ended the farm experience, which was an actual form of wealth, due to internal corruption from within. Moving forward, 181. There are certain substances which experience has proved to be effectual in preventing the condensation of etheric energy from taking place. I want to still find what I was reading last night. There are two types of practical psychic work which can be used separately or in combination. The latter method, in my opinion, given by far the best results. The method, which we will distinguish as the meditative method, consists of mediation upon abstract qualities, such as peace, harmony, protection, and the love of God. Okay, so she forgot a T there. That would be meditation. It is the method of the New Thought School, and its value lies in the harmonizing effect it has upon the emotional state and its counteracting of harmful autosuggestions. Again, I'm going to mention Google Vipassana. You can be a member of a religion now with particular beliefs, and something like Vipassana meditation doesn't then bring in other things that you're going to be uncomfortable with. It's observing your breath and not reacting, and that's it. And there are lectures that go along with Vipassana meditation that you can listen to help you escape the monkey mind. So you can be a Christian, you can be a Muslim, I believe, or you can be someone else that may say, okay, I'm not going to get close to anything that may be dealing with other deities or whatnot, but something as simple as observing your breath is not channeling. It's not even close. Becoming aware of your senses is not channeling. And so even in 2018, throughout my whole life, I have never stopped meeting people that are straight up from a village in a 10th century European Dark Age reality. I mean, there are literally people amongst us that are the same people from way back when in that village. And whether it be in Europe or the Middle East, in the past, in some sort of time of persecution, there are people amongst us in a society that has a U.S. Constitution. And they, though, want to work against the sharing of one's own ideas because they're no longer in the day and age where it's legal to string people up that have beliefs that are spiritually different. If there were people, though, that would emerge in the political sphere or people that would be placed in power that would rekindle the illusions of separation and the fear, the people that would bring back the witch hunts, they would support them. And the reality is they are now. They are now. And those on the left supported it in the past when Obama was the president and there was this poking and jabbing at the conspiracy theorists. You know, it's sad. It was on an old Facebook meme on Facebook. But conspiracy theorists, they're the modern Gnostics. There's a little bit of truth in that. There's a lot of dark Gnostics as well, though. They're not true Gnostics. They're just dabbling with spiritual principles, calling themselves Gnostics, like certain YouTube channels. But they're not really walking with the light. John Lash, get the hell out of here. Going back, in my opinion, and with all due respect to the practitioners of this latter method, much better results would be obtained with its utilization of a formula used to enable the mind to climb into the pure air of spiritual consciousness where no evil is, rise above even fighting, and going more to a pure state of consciousness that isn't even attracting some of that. Now, I want to say that it is our role to talk about some of these things, but we also have to grow to a certain level of ability to where we're no longer being attacked in the same way. So some people are wrong in saying that we shouldn't be exposing what they're doing in our world. They're wrong. They're wrong by promoting that we say nothing and we do nothing. Where they're right, or where there is room to be looking at what we're doing, what can we learn about becoming more powerful at what we're doing? Less weak up here, right? So there are certain things that other people think is spiritual, like, well, what you focus on, and it's like they're really just kind of almost using that as spiritual propaganda to get us to stand down while they do nothing, thinking that's spiritual. And I'm thinking that that's only part of it. Like, don't focus on it. It's like, no. There's a bunch of like logic that's fallen that people will tell themselves to stay in the Chuck E. Cheese plastic ball reality. There are certain principles that are true, but it doesn't mean that we aren't here to bring light to certain things in order to help others. Again, our physical human form only lasts so long. But what about our spirit or our soul? It is argued that that is timeless. So, yeah, if someone's going to run security at a nightclub, once in a while, someone's going to throw a swing at you. It doesn't mean that there isn't a need for security at a nightclub. Somebody's got to do it. And not all people that do it forever throughout their whole lives or things like that. There's a time and a place. You got to pick your shots. There's a time in one's life where they may have the youth, the vitality, the spirit. They may be eating enough and they may be healthy enough at that moment that they're speaking, that's the moment to be sharing that truth. Then there are other times in which they may not be strong. Maybe that's the time to be silent. By the way, folks, yeah, I've been beat up. I'm a tortured soul. But when you're tortured to a certain degree, you can almost go into a state of consciousness when there's a certain level of torture and go, okay, I'm over here now. I'm bigger than my toe. Okay, my toe is this. I'm over here now. And so there are certain things that are legendary about the ninja and, things of that nature, or ancient warriors. It was the idea of, even if one is captured by their enemy, that they do not disclose the secrets, or they do not disclose where they came from, or what name they come in, what tribe they've come from, where the location is of their village. So there were allegedly powers of the mind that the ninja cultivated, so in case they were captured, that the people that sent them would not be at risk. Okay, so occult attacks may be divided into two types: those which take place by means of thought forms, and those which operate by means of current force. But even in the latter case, the current of force soon gathers to itself, or germinates thought forms to its nature. Therefore, in every psychic disturbance, the thought form is a factor which has to be considered and dealt with, and which in fact forms the readiness means of diagnosis. Okay, thought force is a thing which has no relation to geographical position, but is a matter of pure consciousness and of tuning to its key note. We can pick up the forces of Dead Face 1,000 years ago after the death of their last votary, and upon the opposite side of the globe to which in that they flourished. But thought forms are another matter. They have position in space, and although they can be moved about with the speed of thought and can be withdrawn to the subtlest level of the astral, and they're anchored to the idea and thus prevented from impinging upon the planes of form, nevertheless, although they do not occupy space, they can be referred to definite positions of space. They can, for instance, be associated with a particular object and will follow that object around, remaining within its magnetic field. The immediate magnetic field is anything from 12 to 30 feet. The remote magnetic field is from 100 to 300 feet. When we are confronted by a disturbing influence emanating from a focus of power, such as the site of an old temple, we have got to deal with the remote magnetic field by means of ceremonial. And this is a method which can only be used by a high-grade initiate, and we will not consider it here. So there are things that she understood and her students, which I do not. And these will always be demonized by the Orthodox religion folks in crowd, and confused by the atheists, and mocked by the New Agers as trying to make it happen. Demonology, and even the Catholic perspective on exorcisms, is not demonic. So there is even widespread criticism, even within religions, even within Catholicism, with regards to exorcism and how it's been treated over the ages. It's been mocked for many, many years. Even the Young Turks were mocking exorcists in Mexico that were responding to widespread gang violence. That's cruel. That's why there's a lot of decent stuff, right, and points that's out there, but you'll see large left YouTube channels, and I'm not saying I'm with the right, I'm saying that both the left and the right will capitalize on certain things, and they will point their finger at those with a spiritual view of what's taking place. Although I think in today's day and age, it's a little concerning, could be a little bit frightening to call out elements of the extreme right that are being caught up in some of these deities, whether it be Odin or whether it be his homie Beetlejuice. Remember, don't say it 3 times or he might appear. It's like, oh my God, man. It's like, and then when you start meeting more and more people that are actually tapping into some of these deities that are already like hearing voices, and then you start coming across people like Jeremy Christian and seeing what his Facebook profile was like. And then, maybe one day you'll become a true speaker like, myself, and you'll have 10 years under your belt, and you'll start getting strange emails that sound like some of these individuals. And then you start really wondering, like, well, what will the world be in a few years? Are we really seeing a shift in human consciousness, or is this the archonic invasion of human consciousness? And if so, have we reached bottom yet? Or are we on the cusp of seeing some of this reversed? So I'm going to end this video there and come back with more. Obviously, this book has a lot of great information, and I think I covered some basic themes, some things for you to talk about. I want to thank the new member at outsidethebox.vhx.tv. I want to thank the new people over at patreon.com/AlexAnsary. I am Alex Ansary, reminding you the path to the ultimate truth and place of power still lies within.